In the thick, velvet darkness of the final night, the cold walls of the temple still stood, silent, watchful, bearing witness to words etched there since the dawn of time. That it was said that deep within the temple, beyond the flickering of the last oil lamps, lay the ancient stones, rough, cracked, dusted with the weight of millennia. Upon these stones were carved strange, writhing symbols, like serpents slithering in stone, spelling out an ancient prophecy. There shall come one from the light. When he falls, he shall descend into the deepest of shadows, and in that abyss, he shall confront the gatekeeper, the one they called the devourer of flesh, the darkness of ages. No one fully understood the meaning of those words, but for centuries, the priests and keepers of the temple dared not come too close to those stones. Some whispered that on stormy nights, one could hear faint cries emanating from the carvings themselves, as though souls, long shackled, wept within the stone. Then came the destined night, when he breathed his last upon the cross. The veil of the temple tore in two, and the ground beneath began to shudder, as though under the march of some invisible army. They said that at that moment, all the darkest gates sealed since the creation of the world, opened at once. And then, like a blade of ice cutting through the night, the question arose, chilling, unanswerable. On the night he died, who awaited him in hell? And why did every dark gate open to receive him? A strange wind swept through the temple, rekindling the dead flames of ancient lamps, throwing a blood-red glow upon the stone walls. In that light, the faces of the guarding angels seemed to harden into something terrible, as though they already foresaw what no mortal dared to speak aloud. Far beyond, in the sulphurous mists, shadowy forms loomed, tall, their eyes glowing like coals, their twisted shapes half hidden in the gloom. They were neither men nor angels any longer. They were relics of a long-forgotten rebellion, spirits condemned, wardens of the abyss. And now, amidst the shrieking of unseen winds and the clanging of iron gates far below, they began to whisper his name. They had been waiting for this moment a very, very long time. Long before that fateful night, the Scriptures had already breathed whispers of this descent, fragments of prophecies scattered like shattered glass through Holy Writ. To those who dared to listen, the verses spoke not only of salvation in the light, but of a terrible journey into the very belly of the darkness. That it is written in Revelation 1 verse 18. Words that thrum like thunder through eternity. I am the living one. I was dead, and now look, I am alive forever and ever, and I hold the keys of death and Hades. These are not the words of a gentle shepherd alone. They are the words of a warrior returning from the battlefield of the abyss, his hands clenched around the iron keys torn from the keepers of the grave. Centuries earlier, the prophet had hinted at this mission in shadows. Ephesians 4 verses 8 to 10 proclaims, when he ascended on high, he took many captives and gave gifts to his people. What does he ascended mean except that he also descended to the lower, earthly regions? In those lower regions, dark, hollowed, suffocating, he walked where no light dared shine. And so too, 1 Peter 3 verses 18 to 20 echoes with dread and awe. He was put to death in the body, but made alive in the spirit. After being made alive, he went and made proclamation to the imprisoned spirits, to those who were disobedient long ago. Who were these imprisoned spirits? Some say they were the rebellious watchers of old, chained in blackest gloom for their transgressions. Others say they were the shades of the antediluvian world, their cries still rattling in the void. Even the Lord himself spoke of this descent. In Matthew 12 verse 40, he declared with unsettling certainty, "For as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the huge fish, so the Son of Man will be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth." The heart of the earth, not merely a tomb of stone, but a cavernous, primordial kingdom of death, older than the pyramids, older than the stars themselves. But what was this place he entered? The ancient Hebrews spoke in fearful tones of Sheol, the shadowland beneath. The earth, where the dead waited in silence, neither truly living nor wholly gone. A place of twilight and whispers, where kings and beggars alike lay side by side, stripped of all but memory. The Greeks called it Hades, a realm divided. Elysian fields for the few blessed, Tartarus for the damned, and Asphodel for the countless. Forgotten, a domain guarded by monstrous beings, its gates sealed by curses older than language. And in the darker corners of Jewish thought, there lurked Gehenna, the valley of Hinnom, a cursed ravine outside Jerusalem that burned eternally. In their minds as a vision of final judgment. Its flames licked at the edges of the imagination, its smoke a warning of what waited at the end of rebellion to the ancients. Death was no gentle sleep. It was a kingdom. It had walls and gates, watchmen and chains. It had rulers, grim, merciless, and corridors where countless souls wandered like shadows blown by an eternal wind that in their minds. The underworld was alive. It breathed. It watched. It waited. And so, when he descended, it was not merely into the silence of a grave. It was into the very veins of this dark empire. Down, down, past the roots of mountains, through caverns slick with ash and blood, where ancient beings still clawed at their chains and muttered prophecies in forgotten tongues. What he found there, and what he wrested from its keepers, was not just victory. It was a confrontation with all the fear and chaos humanity had buried in the dark since the beginning of time. It was written, though few dared to understand it, in the forgotten corners of Scripture and in the whispers of prophets who saw beyond the veil. There lay a darker chapter of the story, one seldom told aloud. From the beginning, the ancient text foreshadowed it. I am the living one, he would declare. I was dead, and now look, I am alive forever and ever, and I hold the keys of death and Hades. Revelation 1 verse 18. But those who truly listened to these words felt an uneasy chill, because keys are not given, they are taken. Paul would later write in Ephesians, as if pulling back the curtain just enough for us to glimpse the abyss. When he ascended on high, he led captives in his train. But what does he ascended mean except that he also descended into the lower parts of the earth? And Peter, his pen heavy with dread and wonder, confessed, he was put to death in the flesh, but made alive in the spirit. In that spirit, he went and proclaimed to the spirits in prison, those who disobeyed long ago. 1 Peter 3 verses 18 to 20. And so the idea formed, whispered on the lips of priests and scribes, that when his body lay still and cold in the tomb, his spirit did not rest. No, it descended. The ancients spoke of Sheol, the shadowlands beneath the earth, where all the dead gathered, a muted kingdom of dust and silence. They spoke of Hades, divided into regions of torment and gloom, ruled by unseen wardens. And they spoke, in fearful tones, of Gehenna, the place where fire never dies and smoke never lifts, the valley of final judgment. Death, to them, was not asleep. It was a kingdom, vast and alive, with gates of iron and legions of watchers. It was said to breathe. It was said to wait. And on the day the veil tore and the sun hid its face, that waiting came to an end. When Jesus breathed his last, the world above quaked. But far below, deeper than any grave, another quake began. In the heart of the earth, the silence of Sheol shattered. The dead stirred in their chains. And the gates of the abyss, long sealed by divine decree, creaked open, not by mercy, but by the presence of one who had come to claim them. He appeared there not as a broken man, but as a conqueror clothed in scars and light, his wounds blazing. Like molten gold, the imprisoned spirits shrank back, their eyes burning with hatred and fear, their chains clattering as they recoiled. These were no ordinary souls. Some said they were the rebellious angels, fallen watchers of old, bound in Tartarus since before the flood. Others said they were the shades of the drowned world before Noah, still howling their ancient defiance. And to these, he spoke. It was not a plea. It was a proclamation. Words, older than language, sharper than iron, echoed through the caverns. I am the living one. I was dead, and now I am alive forevermore. And the keys, they are mine. But the darkness did not yield easily. The guardians of the pit, twisted forms, eyes like coals, wings shredded, claws dripping with black flame, rose to block his path. They hissed and roared, their voices like thunder and grinding stone. And yet, every chain that dared touch him melted. Every gate he approached buckled and groaned before shattering into dust. His light spread outward, unstoppable, reaching even the farthest chambers of Sheol, where the righteous dead, the faithful ones, the weary prophets, the silent martyrs, had long awaited deliverance. They looked up from their shadowed exile and saw him, and for the first time in ages, they wept with joy. The ground shook as their bonds fell away, one by one, and they began to rise behind him like a river of stars returning to the sky. And then came the throne. In the deepest chasm of the abyss stood the gatekeeper, a figure ancient and monstrous, seated upon a throne of bone and flame, clutching in its talons two great keys of blackened steel. Its voice crawled across the stone. "You do not belong here, Son of Man." But he did not flinch. He stepped forward, and even the fires themselves recoiled from him. When his hand closed over the keys, the gatekeeper shrieked, not in pain alone, but in realization that its reign was over, and the keys burned in his grasp, now blazing with his light, no longer blackened, no longer the trophies of death and hell, but the spoils of a war none could see, yet all would feel. Thus, the pain of hell and the triumph of Christ met in that moment. It was no mere agony of the damned, but a battle, fierce and final. Not defeat, but a victory wrenched from the very jaws of darkness. A victory that split the night in two, left scars on the walls of the abyss, and marked forever the gates that could no longer hold him, nor those he came to free. When he ascended again, the cavern was silent but for the echo of chains breaking and the last whisper of the gatekeeper fading into nothing. The keys are no longer ours. The keys, they were more than iron, more than metal, more than mere tools. They were ancient symbols, older than the world, forged in the first dawn of creation when the heavens and the abyss were divided. They were not made to open simple doors. No, these keys ruled over the thresholds of existence itself, over the dark corridors where no man dared tread, over the gates of death and hell that no one could unlock. Until him that I in the beginning. These keys were entrusted to the morning stars, to the highest of the angelic hosts, as a charge to watch and keep. But when rebellion boiled in heaven and the serpent fell like lightning, the keys fell with him. And from that day, death reigned under the serpent's coils, and Hades became his throne. As the scriptures say, through fear of death, he held them all their lives in bondage. Hebrews 2 verses 14 to 15. Death was his scepter. The gates were his fortress. The keys, his proof of dominion, and no king on earth could command them. No prophet could wrest them from his claws. Every man, every woman, every child who ever breathed was dragged through those gates, powerless to resist. The keys never erred. They locked behind every soul, sealing their fate. And so he guarded them jealously, clutching them in his talons deep in the blackest pit, gloating over humanity's chains. For ages, he watched the generations come and go, each one swallowed by his darkness, each one shackled to his dominion. But then came the Son of Man. He descended, uninvited, a blaze of light into the dark. And the serpent hissed and writhed on his throne, for he knew his reign was at an end. When Jesus stood before the gatekeeper, before the monstrous throne of bone and flame, he did not ask. He did not beg. He reached. And when his fingers closed around the ancient iron, the air itself screamed, the pit roared, and every demon cowered as the keys seared his hands, not in pain, but in power. The keys burned brightly now, no longer blackened and cold, but alive with his victory, blazing as if newly forged. For the first time since the rebellion, they no longer belonged to the serpent. And as he held them high, the walls of Hades shook and splintered. Chains across the abyss snapped like threads, and his voice rang out, not just through that cursed realm, but through the heavens, the earth, and even into the marrow of every soul. No more shall you be bound. No more shall sin and death and hell hold you captive. The keys are mine. The gates are mine. And I will open what no one can shut, and I will shut what no one can open. That is what the keys meant. They were not simply his prize. They were his proclamation that the reign of death was broken, that the chains of sin could no longer hold forever, that the gates of hell could no longer swallow endlessly in his grasp. The keys no longer guarded the way to darkness. They opened the way to light, and in that single act, In that seizing of the keys, he claimed sovereignty not only over the heavens above, but over the abyss below. Never again would the serpent sit unchallenged on his throne. Never again would the keys be his to wield. From that moment forward, they burned with a new authority, a holy fire no shadow could endure. And so they remain, clutched in the hands of the living one, testament to a battle won in silence, in darkness, in blood and light, where even hell itself had to bow. What truly happened in the belly of the earth, no mortal has ever seen. No scribe recorded it in full. No prophet dared to look upon it and speak plainly. Yet in the centuries since, theologians and poets, preachers and mystics have tried, piecing together whispers from Scripture, fragments of vision, and the cries of ancient hymns, to imagine that hidden war. Some say it began with silence, a suffocating silence, like the hush before a storm. And then, the gates of the pit shuddered and burst wide, vomiting smoke and fire, as the Son of Man descended into the heart of the abyss. There, in the darkness, a legion awaited him. The fallen watchers, once stars of the morning, now twisted into monsters. The beasts of Tartarus, half shadow, half fire, their eyes like molten coals. The great serpent himself, coiled upon a throne of bone and ash, his black wings stretched across the cavern, his voice hissing through the gloom. You shall not take them. And so began a war, not of flesh and blood, but of essence and eternity. Those who have dared to speak of it say the darkness rose up in waves, a tide of claws and chains and teeth, crashing upon him. That every sin ever spoken, every curse ever uttered, every nightmare ever dreamt became soldiers in that army. They say the very stones of the abyss split and bled as he moved through them. Each step a judgment, each breath a declaration that the darkness could not endure. The serpent struck, its tail a whip of fire, its maw a pit of screaming winds. But the light did not falter. He grasped the serpent by the throat, and the hiss became a shriek. Its wings tore, its crown of ash fell into the dust, and the chains it wrapped around him, ancient, heavy, cold as death, cracked and clattered to the floor like brittle glass. In some visions, the host of Hades, a multitude of shadowed souls, fell to their knees as he passed, not in worship, but in defeat, for they knew his name. Some say he raised his hands, and the walls of the pit trembled. The doors of iron flew from their hinges, and the forgotten captives cried out as their bonds dissolved. The air itself seemed to ignite with a strange and dreadful light, not warm, not gentle, but burning, unrelenting, like the blaze of judgment itself. And above it all, the serpent lay broken, pinned beneath his foot, its great wings torn and blackened, its eyes dim with terror. The old songs still tell of it. The harrowing of hell, they call it in the West. A phrase too soft for what truly happened. A storm, a siege, a conquest of the most terrible kind. In these ancient hymns, they sing of gates shattered, chains falling like rain, shadows fleeing from his light. They sing of the great roar of victory echoing through the void, as the Son of Man led forth the captives, a river of souls pouring out of the darkness behind him. Hell trembled, death wept, the grave was emptied, so the songs say, and though no mortal saw it, and no tongue can fully tell it, the earth itself remembers. Every quake and crack in the rock, every burst of light through the tomb, every whisper of chains breaking in the silence of night. All of it a memory of that invisible war, the war that broke the back of the darkness forever. Even now, the echoes of that battle still roll like distant thunder through creation. Some say you can feel it if you stand in silence, if you close your eyes and listen, to the wind in the stones, to the hush of the earth itself. Somewhere beneath your feet, the chains are still lying broken. Somewhere deep below, the ashes of that throne still smolder, and the great serpent still weeps in his defeat. But above, here, among the living, his triumph changed everything. For countless ages, men walked the earth in the shadow of death. We feared it, not just the end of breath, but the emptiness that followed. We imagined it waiting at every turn, a gate that swallowed all things and never gave them back. We thought of it as a prison no one could escape, guarded by creatures whose names we dared not speak. But he descended into that prison. He shattered its locks. He tore open its gates, and when he rose again, he left those gates hanging open behind him forever. What does that mean for you? It means you no longer walk in chains. It means the darkness that once claimed you no longer has the right. It means death, that ancient, hungry thing, has been robbed of its teeth. Sin no longer writes the final chapter of your story. The verdict of the abyss has been overturned. The silence of Sheol has been broken. Even now, the keys hang at his side, bright and hot with victory. Proof that the grave has no claim on you, that the old gates can no longer shut behind you. And so he stands at the edge of the chasm, calling you into the light. His voice carries with it the weight of that battle and the warmth of that triumph. You are free, he says. What will you do with this freedom? Will you walk back into the shadows? Will you kneel before the ruins of a defeated king? Or will you step into the path he opened, through the shattered gates, over the broken chains, and into the dawn beyond? This is not just a story of what he did long ago in the depths. It is a story that still burns in the marrow of the world, a choice that still lingers at the threshold of every soul, because the keys are his. The gates are open, and the chains are gone. Now it is your turn to decide. Will you live as though you are still bound? Or will you rise, as he did, and walk into the freedom he bought with his own blood, a freedom brighter than the sun and older than the stars? The gates no longer hold you. The grave no longer wants you. The darkness can no longer keep you. So choose. The light is waiting. Even the most ancient truths are hard for mortal hearts to grasp, and so the sages have wrapped these truths in stories, parables forged of flesh and bone, whispers of what happened in the abyss made visible in the lives of men. They tell of a man forgotten by the world, rotting in a dungeon so deep that the light of the sun never touched his face. Iron bars sealed him in, heavy chains coiled around his wrists and ankles like serpents. The jailer passed his door only to throw scraps and laugh at his despair. This man had long since forgotten what freedom even felt like. But one day in the silence of that pit, he heard footsteps, not the cruel rhythm of the jailer, but something heavier, stronger, unafraid of the darkness. And then, the clang of keys, a sound he thought he'd never hear again. The lock groaned, ancient and unwilling, but it yielded. The chains fell away, as if ashamed to hold him, and the stranger's voice cut through the black. You are free. Step into the light. And when the man stumbled out of his cell, blinking, he saw the prison behind him was crumbling into dust. The jailer was gone, and the keys that had freed him still blazed in the stranger's hand. They tell of another, a woman trapped in a house, set ablaze. The air was black with smoke, and every door she tried was barred, every window swallowed by flame. Around her, the walls groaned and cracked, and the heat began to blister her skin. In the terror, she sank to the floor, convinced there was no way out, when suddenly she heard it, the crash of a door torn from its hinges. A shaft of light pierced the thick smoke, and there stood a figure in the doorway, his face obscured by flame, but his arm outstretched. Come, he called. There is a way. Follow me. And though the house roared in fury behind her, she fled through that single path. And when she looked back, the doorway was gone, consumed by the inferno, as if it had never been there at all. Others tell it more personally. They speak of nights when they sat alone and felt the weight of invisible chains around their hearts, when guilt and fear and shame wrapped them so tight they thought they'd never stand again. But then, a dream, or a vision, or a quiet knock at the soul, and suddenly, they felt the keys turn and the grip of the darkness loosen. The chains clattered away, and they breathed again. These stories are only shadows of the greater story, the true descent into the prison below and the great hand that tore the gates from their hinges. But they are given to us as signs, as reminders, as echoes of what was won that day in the depths of the earth. If you have ever stood at the bars of your own prison, if you have ever felt the walls closing in, if you have ever believed there was no way out, then listen closely. There is the sound of keys on the stone. There is a door groaning open. There is a voice in the smoke. You are free. Step into the light. And when you walk out, you will find the prison collapsing behind you, and the fire swallowing itself, and the darkness retreating like a wounded beast. And you will know that the keys were not only for ancient kings and prophets, they were for you, too, and the one who holds them still stands at the threshold of your night, waiting. And so the story descends into silence, but it is not the silence of defeat. It is the silence of a battlefield after the last cry has faded, when the dust begins to settle and the smoke clears to reveal what has been won. Far beneath the earth, the broken gates still hang ajar, the chains lie rusting in the dust, and the throne of the serpent is nothing but blackened ash. The echo of that war still lingers in the stones, and above it all stands the Conqueror, clothed in light, his hands still marked by scars, but holding aloft the keys that can never again be stolen. He has shattered the shackles of death. He has torn open the path through hell, and he has not only walked that path himself, he has left it open for you. This is not merely a tale of what was done long ago, in darkness and fire and blood. It is a question, burning even now at the edge of your soul. How are you living, knowing the freedom he bought with his very life? Will you stand still, chained by shadows that no longer hold power? Will you return to the ruins of the prison he has already burned to the ground? Or will you walk through the gates he opened, into the strange, terrible brightness of the dawn he won for you? The choice does not belong to the darkness anymore. It belongs to you. So listen, even now, you can almost hear the faint jangle of keys in the silence and the quiet voice calling your name. You are free. Step into the light, and may you walk boldly where he has already walked, through gates that can no longer close, through shadows that can no longer bind, into the light that no darkness can ever overcome. May your feet remember the path. May your heart remember the sound of chains breaking, and may your soul remember that the keys hang forever in his hands, for you. Amen. Candle X Mystery reflects at X Mystery. We tell these stories not just to dazzle the imagination, though they are dazzling, not just to chill the spine, though they are chilling, but because these ancient mysteries still speak. They speak to something buried in all of us: the fear of the unknown, the dread of death, the hunger for freedom, the longing for light. This story of the keys, the chains, and the shattered gates is more than myth or metaphor. It is a mirror, a reminder that though the powers of darkness seem eternal, they are not. That though the prisons of our guilt and fear feel unbreakable, they are not. That we invite you, our listener, our fellow seeker, to sit with this mystery a while longer. To imagine the sound of those iron gates groaning open, the feel of the chains slipping from your wrists, the rush of cold air as you step from darkness into light, and to ask yourself, honestly, am I still sitting in a prison whose door already stands open? At X Mystery, we do not pretend to have all the answers, but we do know this: the keys are no longer in the hands of the serpent. The gates no longer decide your fate. The darkness no longer owns you, and that is a mystery worth remembering.
If you enjoy the content we share and you want to join its mystery in uncovering the most intriguing mysteries of the planet, don't hesitate. Click subscribe today and become part of a community that loves exploring the unknown.